So this is our next panel here. Just to introduce myself, I'm Akiko Fujita with CNBC, and our panel here, we're talking about millennial travelers today, specifically adaptation and innovation, how some of these big brands are really pivoting to try and market towards these millennials. We're going to try to take a look at what the values are, what the profile of that traveler is, and also how some of these more traditional companies are trying to pivot their business there. But I want to go down the line here because we've got a pretty impressive panel here. If we can just go one by one and kind of introduce ourselves before we get started.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Janice Chan. I'm Senior Director of Digital Marketing at STARWOOD Hotels Asia Pacific. And if you're not familiar with some of our brands, we have just one just down the road called Westin. We have a St. Regis, Sheraton, Westin, 4 Points by Sheraton. We have 12 brands, but you get the idea.
Hi, I'm Tim Kobe. I'm founder and CEO of 8 Inc. We're an experience design firm with clients such as Apple, Virgin, Ford, Lincoln, Nissan, etc.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Akira Mitsumasu from Japan Airlines. I'm Vice President for Marketing and Strategy for the APAC region. We have 3 flights from Singapore to Tokyo daily. If you're planning your next trip, that's not an airline to miss.
Do we get a code? Do we get a special price? Hi, I'm Faeez from Tripfez. So what we do is basically we're targeting the Muslim travelers. So we have a website called Tripfez, which is a lot like TripAdvisor, focusing on reviews as well as booking, targeting Muslim travelers.
Okay, so I thought I'd get started today by sort of looking at the profile of a millennial traveler, because we've been using that term so much, obviously at the Millennial 2020 conference, and even in the US alone, when you look at the population we're talking about here, it's 92 million people. And in Asia, the potential is obviously big because you look at the disposable income of $6 trillion. So we'll look globally, but focus on Asia. And I wonder, Janice, if you can get us started. When we talk about that traveler, the millennial traveler, we hear so much about how much more tech savvy they are, how much more independent they are. If you can, what do you see when you think, here's who we're targeting, this is what that traveler is like?
Well, millennial travelers are really the next generation, well, not the current generation of travelers we want to groom to, while they may still be early in their careers, to groom to become from a Sheraton stayer to a St. Regis stayer when they're, when they're a little more mature. Although we're trying to stay away from that branding with St. Regis. So, but the millennial travelers, yes, they're connected. They are all about building, not being sold to. Therefore, there's a statistic that 84% of millennials don't see or don't believe in ads. So it does require that brands like STARWOOD completely rethink about how do we communicate and start a conversation or build that relationship with millennials.
So certainly less brand loyalty as well, right? They think independently. And I want to see if we can bring Akira in here, because we talk about the traditional brands here. STARWOOD certainly one of them, but Japan Airlines too. When you think about a more independent traveler, how do you have to change up your marketing strategy to try and appeal to that younger demographic?
Well, to begin with, I think I don't see the millennial as a homogeneous group. It's actually perhaps one of the most diverse segments. You can think of a single mother in Tokyo or a young Faraday in Beijing, and you can think of many, many small tribes. So as an airline, we try to really think of the needs and to think of how these groups of people build their own personal value ecosystem and how we can be, as an airline, be part of that ecosystem. I think is our approach towards looking at the millennials.
Okay. And Faeez, your site is unique in that way that you target specifically towards younger Muslim travelers. One of what we've seen with technology and obviously all the information that's available online now is more personalized travel. What are you seeing on your site and in terms of the searches that are happening there?
Well, I think the millennials are a bit different kind of people in the sense that when they make their choices, it's always about them. So it's never about, let's say in the past, it was always about the hotel will provide you whatever they want to provide. But nowadays, it's more like, I want to go to a place which has what I want. It's never about the hotel deciding it. It's more about the personal traveler deciding it. And the interesting thing about the Millennial is that I think there was a survey recently that was conducted and concluded that 80% are influenced by peer reviews and 56% will then leave reviews after they travel. So it's a lot more about listening to what their friends are talking about. It's a lot more about reading what bloggers are writing, the whole experience. So I think in the end, it's all about experience. It's all about personalization and localization. So on our site, for example, we're targeting Muslim travelers, and we all know that 50% of the Muslim population are actually the millennials. So when they travel, they have certain needs and certain requirements which we provide. So the information that we provide, and we tend to see that hotels which has this kind of information tends to convert, tends to have 300% more interaction with 47% more conversion. So it's a lot more about information, it's a lot more about experience, and etc. Yeah.
And when you talk about experiences, you know, what I read over and over is that these travelers, younger travelers, are really seeking out more cultural experiences. They're not looking for that package travel plan anymore, but it's whether it's staying with a local host at an Airbnb or seeking out something else, they're looking for something that's a little off the beaten path, right?
I think it's a lot more like you want to go to a place where it's not normal, where all your friends are going. So you want to have, see, the millennial, they like to show off. So you use social media to show off that I was in Nepal and you're not there. So that's the kind of like trends that you can see. So when let's say when I open Facebook in the morning, I'll see a friend of mine posting, I was in Bhutan on the peak of a hill and this is my beautiful pictures. Just to rub it off to the other people that I was there. So this is the kind of experience that they are searching for. Experience which is new, experience which is not, which you see on a daily basis, and yeah, along that line. So you will not see people posting, I was in New York on the main square. So it's kind of boring, so everyone's been there. So you want to have new pictures, new experience, new visual, which you want to show off to your friends.
So Tim, I'd love to bring you into the conversation because you know, we were just talking about how traditional companies can try to offer that new when that brand name is so ingrained with a certain image. How do you appeal? How do you sort of make that pivot if you are that brand who already if you already have an established brand?
Yeah, I think, you know, at Apple, Steve used to say that marketing was about values. And I think today he would probably say that probably more importantly, the company is about values. That particularly when you're looking at millennial engagement, what you say and what you do and how you behave, all of those things have to have a certain degree of integrity and consistency. And I think, you know, that's where looking very closely at what it is that makes you different. I think the survey is something like 80% of CEOs think they're offering a differentiated product and 8% of consumers agree. So there's a huge disconnect. And the reason is many companies turn and deliver products that may be differentiated in the same way as their competitors. And so I think you see this over and over, that the experience is being somewhat diluted by the strategy of how to implement and deliver it.
You were saying there's a lot of Me Too companies that are out there. And the thinking here, when you look at the potential of this generation, is to say, okay, how can we target them from a marketing perspective? But you're saying that it goes much deeper than that because they're not just looking for that advertisement that targets them, but looking beyond just the company face to see what kind of values, what their corporate responsibility is, that kind of thing?
Right. I think, you know, that's a big part of it, and I think that there's generally been a flood of companies that are emulating other companies and sort of in the game because of the general lack of competition. But the competition is going to get much more intense. And as it does, what you stand for and what you're delivering that's differentiated is actually where you'll see value. And I think that's kind of this next wave. Not only are we addressing millennial audience, we also have a lot of companies that are founded by millennials and assuming that it's going to be sort of this gold rush time, going forward.
So Janice, let's talk strategy here, because you were just talking about all the hotels that Starwood already has, but I know Starwood has started to develop this hotel that is more boutique-like, aesthetically, that targets a younger audience. What is the strategy been for Starwood?
Well, we know that we need to, as our customer base grows and with us and age and as they're moving from a Sheraton to a St. Regis, we need to groom the next generation of customers. And one of the interesting things that we noticed when we first launched the W brand over 15 years ago now in New York, was that the bars were filled with young people, but the rooms are filled with suits who can afford the $300 room night, right? So we said, okay, so obviously these young people want that W lifestyle, but there's just not a brand within the Starwood portfolio that can cater to this. So we took the opportunity and completely invented a new brand called Aloft Hotels, and it targets just that group of young customers. So it's the lofts are built completely modeled with a very flexible. It's not like a traditional hotel. There's an XYZ bar. There's a snack bar underneath, and then also we do not do any marketing with the Aloft. It's all about using programming and partnerships to connect with that guest. So we have Aloft, Project Aloft Star, which is about featuring local rock bands and doing a competition. It's a partnership with MTV, and where we're featuring rock bands and then actually attracting the local community to come and engage with these young talent musicians, as well as then communicating that, hey, Aloft is a great hub for music. We have other programs for design and technology. For example, we have the first hotel bottler, which is a robot butler. So you don't actually have to tip the guy anymore if you just want a toothbrush. And a robot will just come and deliver your toothbrush if you called for room service, etc.
We do something actually quite similar. Millennials, very often when they travel, they feel this huge gap between what they do at home and when they travel, when everything becomes back to the sort of old age, where you have to fill in this application form, where you have to go through a lot of processes that are not digital at all. So we try to provide experience like the in-flight entertainment. Everything will be very much like what you do with your mobile phones, smartphones, and you have this sort of experience whereby you don't feel this huge gap. And this applies not just to the in-flight experience, it also applies to what the brand stands for. So if, for example, you are very much attached to sports-related activities, we do things like athlete challenge sponsorship, whereby if anyone donates a certain amount of mileage, we, as an airline, give the same amount, we match the same amount. And we feed all these stories about, or if you are interested in sailing, we feed you stories about sailing and to keep you engaged. So there are many ways to keep the millennials engaged and also have them to have the same kind of experience that they normally have.
Tim, I wonder if I can bring you in, because obviously you're a designer, you've been behind the Apple Store, the Genius Bar, you've sort of seen how consumers react to certain aesthetics, but also in the way things are laid out. When you hear what Starwood is doing, do you think something like that could be sort of the strategy here to get to a younger audience?
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually working on an Aloft project in Melbourne right now.
Oh, you are? There you go.
Yeah, there you go. No, I think the approach of defining the experience, making it differentiated, understanding the preferences that people have. All of this information needs to feed into what criteria you have in creating the right types of outcomes. I think you also have to look at it strategically. When you mentioned the Apple program, the Genius Bar, could have been a service counter, but no one would care. So giving it a proprietary name, giving it a distinctive experience, letting that become part of the way people communicate. A lot of it is building in the nomenclature, building in the way we talk about the experience as part of the experience. So that enables people to share the information, share the distinctive points.
One of the things that we keep hearing about is just how cost conscious these travelers are. They want a lot of value in where they're going, but they can search 10 other sites here to make sure they get the best deal. And Faeez, I wonder if you are seeing that in the users of your site. What specifically are they looking here? What's the price point here? Is it more about the value they can get out of it? Is it about trying to extend that dollar, or is it just trying to travel as much as they can and understanding that, obviously they need to maybe cut back a bit, especially on accommodation?
Well, I think it's a lot depending on the demographic as well. So for example, in Southeast Asia, it's always about you don't want to pay, but you want the experience. So for example, myself, I want to stay at a 5-star hotel, but I don't want to pay 5-star hotel. So when I travel, like I join many programs just to make sure that I have a 5-star hotel, but not paying 5-star hotel. So, but we have other kind of demographic from other region, like let's say the Middle East, where they're not, how do you say, they are not, they don't mind spending as long as they have an amazing experience and they can spend 3 weeks in Malaysia just to have the most awesome time. So they have, for example, in Middle East, they have long holidays, and they want to spend these long holidays as much as they can with their family, with their friends. So they don't mind spending a lot as long as they have the most amazing experience and holiday. So it depends a lot on demographic, I'd say.
Are there specific destinations that you find are the most popular that sort of meets all of that criteria?
Well, I think for Southeast Asian, it's a lot more like off the beaten path. So for example, Air Asia is opening Iran. So a lot of my friends are talking about, let's go to Iran. So that's something which is exciting, something which is new, something which is good in pictures that you can show off to your friends. So it's a lot more on destination where it's new basically. So you have a new experience which you can actually, which is not experienced a lot by other people.
Before we get to more questions, I want to see if we can open it up to the audience. If there's any questions from there, we'll continue talking up here, but if there are any questions, feel free to raise your hand and then we'll see if we can get the mic around. One of the things I did want to talk to you, Janice, about is this concept of bleisure that I keep hearing over and over, which is, yes, as you said, if it's a personal travel, you want to get the most bang for your buck, but increasingly, because you don't have to work specifically from your office, it's this notion of combining business and leisure on the company's dime and then trying to extend that a bit more. We're seeing that more and more. So as a brand like STARWOOD, how do you sort of, target that? Is that going?
And I think this is where the rewards and the loyalty programs come into strong play, right? And one of the main reasons why SPG, our loyalty program, is also recognized as one of the most popular and best loyalty programs out there, because by using, let's say, you're expensing the Western stay, but then during your holidays you can use all your points and you stay at a W in Bali. So then that's how you can really benefit from that. We're also seeing that a lot of, not just millennials, right? Just even people, Gen X and Gen Y are also looking at opportunities where they can extend a stay, weekend stays at hotels, etc. So loyalty programs, I think, is a big play for it to try to capture this bleisure market.
Mm-hmm. Akira, are you seeing that over with on the airline side as well?
Yes, most certainly. We see the trend coming, and indeed more and more business travelers, instead of going on a separate trip for the vacation, they would just combine them together and make the most out of the trip. Many companies would allow that and actually encourage that because it actually saves more time and increases productivity. The way we do to help them is actually to try to provide more information. So if we are on a business trip to Japan, for example, we will provide you with a guide of Japan so that you could make the most out of the trip and do, yes, leisure.
Okay.
I want to add one more. Another way to, of course, to entice the bleisure stay is to inspire the potential guests or traveler to stay beyond, right? So what's there to do other than be stuck in traffic in Jakarta, right? There are lots of other activities, and or example Tokyo. You know, a lot of times when you're a business traveler, you're in and out. You see the car, you get to your hotel room, and then you're out. So another way to inspire that is, of course, using content and to deliver like interesting, inspiring travel content that can then allow, you know, maybe trigger something that's like, maybe like spend my stay for an extra day just to check out what I read on, you know, on this site, etc.
Okay. Are there any questions from the audience? No? Okay. This is a question for everybody here. How have you used social media to try and get your brand out, your value out, the name out? How have you utilized it?
Okay, well.
I think social media plays a crucial role in promoting the brand among millennials. I think there was a recent study that shows that 33% of millennial trust blogs more than they trust TV ad or radio ads. So if you can get your message out through social media, through blogs, it has a much bigger impact to the brand rather than just doing traditional ads if you're targeting millennial. But at the same time, what we realize is that social media doesn't really convert that well, but it's a good platform to actually get your brand outside, but it doesn't really convert in a sense that people don't come to your site and instantly book. But it's a great tool to get people talking about the brand. It's a great tool to get the message outside and get a lot more people to know about it.
I think it's very important for any brands, especially in overseas markets, to make use of social media, because in your own home country, people don't have to discover your brand. Most likely that they already know your brand, but outside your home country, the customer journeys start with actually discovering and recognizing, exploring your brand, and hence the use of social media becomes more important.
Yeah, I would just say, you know, with a brand like Xiaomi in China, for example, what's interesting is not only is the brand pushing and sharing who they are, they're actually using their community to help define the next products and get insights into different types of experiences that they're looking to develop. So they're using it really as, you know, a focus group of millions of people, but you know, they'll put out a product before it ever goes to market to get feedback on it and help develop it and help get insights. Some are useful, some are not, but they have an enormous community of people who are contributing to the brand. So those people tend to have ownership in the company and therefore more loyalty, because one of the things we always see these days is struggle with loyalty.
How much of that, though, weighs on the actual decision? I mean, you see so many comments online. I mean, how do you incorporate that and actually take what's of value to really decide the eventual product?
Yeah, there's a lot of sifting, especially in a huge community. But I think the design team there is actually very, very good at understanding, in some cases, what is the literal reference, in some cases, what is the implied idea, and then helping to translate that into the product development. But I think it goes beyond just a conversation, but it's starting to actually shape what the business is becoming.
I think one important way of sort of extracting insights out of social media through, for example, social listening and so forth, is not just look at your product, it's to sort of zoom out of your value offering. So as an airline, I do not just look at traveling from A to B, I zoom out of that and look at the conversation of what are the needs and wants, the motivations that drives people towards certain actions of trying to travel abroad or going abroad to studies or sending the kids to school, etc. And you get more insights out of that to help you to redesign your product and redefine your product.
Yeah, I think there are many ways you use social media, including like getting customer insights, engaging in a conversation, customer service. The one thing that my team always comes to me is like, as a brand, how do we become social by design? So as our customers, who are millennials, are always looking for ways to boast through social media as a network, how do we give them moments where they want to actually then post this on social media? So it's from the minute they walk in through the door of the lobby of our hotels, is there something that's interesting enough for them to take a selfie with, or or do a Snapchat or whatever it is, but doing poke stops if we need to, right? Anchoring people to come and come to our hotels. We tried that too, and so it's looking at different ways to engage an audience, but also asking our teams to rethink about, it's not just put a sign here and say take a picture here, but yeah, you got to make it interesting. Otherwise, it won't be social by design, right?
So, but I wonder how much of that sharing really translates into actual bookings and actual visits.
Well, we're very revenue performance driven, and one of the remits of my team has been to how we're measuring actual revenue from our social media efforts. And one of the ways that we found to do that this has been effective is think of social media as a method of prospecting, right? You're building as initial branding, engagement, conversation with this guest or potential customer. You now have information about them, whether it's their personal information through their social media profiles, or whether you tagged them some way or another through technology, whatever. Then now they are in our database, so to speak, and we can then customize the messaging that we send out to these guests, and then you can now work through using various marketing channels and tactics to then remarket to them with something that it would be relevant to them. And so we've been able to, and I think the other benefit of travel, being in a travel brand, is that people buy the product before they ever get to use the product. So we're able to track the conversions and the bookings online, which is, I think it's one of the lucky things about being travel.
So right now we're talking about people in their 20s and 30s. Obviously this is a pretty big demographic that's going to stick around for some time as your customers, consumers. And I wonder, when you look ahead, obviously patterns, behaviors change as they grow older. As a brand that is really looking to tap into that market, what do you do to look for that next trend, to anticipate that next move? Because we all know it's not going to stay static.
It's going to be a learning experience for all of us, but what the benefit that we have now is data, right? So we have a ton of data, whether it's gathering first-party data or third-party data from, that you look at your current customer base and matching it with what's out there in the social media networks or with third-party partners, etc. There's so much data, and being, I think, as any brands, it's important to be able to have the expertise and the and also putting the effort and time in to try to mine that data and make something useful out of it.
Actually, I think there's two things going on concurrently. We do see sort of a macro convergence where you see trends and people tend to, on the surface, behave on the same way. But at the same time, there's also micro divergence whereby people are deep inside, increasingly more differentiated. And the important thing, I think, for any brand is really to build up a wide repertoire to meet different needs and not just pick up the big trends.
Tim, it seems like you look at a place like the Apple Store, right? That's one of those that's somehow been able to appeal across generations, and it's continued to stay that way. What do you do to look forward here, to say, okay, what's that next big thing coming, and how do we prepare for it? How do we make sure that we are on the ball with that? Yeah,
I think the Apple work was successful because it expressed the brand. It wasn't necessarily targeting a demographic or looking for a specific type of audience. It was people who shared those values were the audience. And I think that's where it goes back to the brands kind of developing a character and being able to express that character, demonstrate the kinds of things that they stand for, and then those values have to resonate back to the audience. It's interesting, I have a 28-year-old daughter and I have an 18-year-old daughter. My 18-year-old daughter thinks my 28-year-old is so old-fashioned and so out of touch. And everything she wants is much more extreme and much much more pushed from say where the older sister was, and so they probably fall into the same demographic we're talking about. But I think that diversity, if you're chasing all the time those changes, it's really tough. You need to define what you stand for, be really clear. We don't have much time to communicate these things. It has to be clear and simple. But if you can express that, then you have a chance to really connect, and hopefully that carries through whatever the sort of the age and psychological state they're in.
So it goes back to what you were saying, which is seeking out the value in your company and staying on message there, so that no matter what that platform is, consumers understand.
Right. I mean, if you share what you stand for, and those are things that resonate with a broad audience, your business is likely to be more successful.
Faeez?
Well, I think as a brand, you have to listen to the customer a lot better, especially the millennial, for example, because right now it's, I think if I'm not mistaken, it's 20% of current travelers are millennial, and it's expected to grow to 50% by 2020. So it's a huge amount of people, and it's a huge opportunity for brands and businesses to target. But the thing with millennial is that it's a lot more about them than rather the brand. So you have to listen to what they want. So let's say for something as simple as having free Wi-Fi can change a lot in the decision of millennials. So if you go to a hotel, for example, and you have two choices between a hotel which has free Wi-Fi, which doesn't, you want Wi-Fi, even though the price is not that much difference, and if you pay a little bit more, you still get the better room, but you tend to choose the one with Wi-Fi. So if you know that, let's say you use social media and you use social listening, that people are looking for free Wi-Fi, you tend to you got to meet their demand and provide that kind of service. So for us, for example, when we target Muslim travelers, some of the things which people want, for example, is halal food. So you have now hotels like the Ritz-Carlton in Berlin or the Grand Hotel in Vienna offering halal food because they want to meet the demand of travelers. So these millennials are asking for it, and they are meeting the demand. That's why you have hotels fulfilling this need. So it's never anymore about we requesting, but it's more about the brand meeting the demand.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, the millennials are born in an age where they have everything on the fingertips. I mean, you just get this piece of information that's before you. And the same with all the experience during the travel, whereby it really has to have the same kind of experience. So like, for example, we provide things like a countdown app whereby it tells you which security gate has the least queuing time, and how long it takes to go to your boarding gate, etc., just to keep these millennials informed and have all the information they need at their fingertips.
I mean, you talk about Wi-Fi as one value, but I understand fitness is another big one, right?
Yeah.
And I think with the rise of millennial, you have a rise of social media, which you can use not just for the good of the brand, but people tend to use it for, let's say you arrive at a place, the place has terrible Wi-Fi, you tweet about it, you tweet to your friends, you tweet to your 20,000 followers, so it's a kind of like brings a bad image to the brand. So if you don't listen to what they do, it's easier to provide free Wi-Fi, for example, than to have them talk about it and then talk bad about it, talk bad to all their friends, to all their families and 20,000 followers, so it becomes a bad image for the brand itself.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one of the challenges is that a lot of these things become hygiene, that you just have to have it to be in the game. What happens when everyone has it? All the competitors, when everyone offers these things that are very easy actually to do, then what makes your brand stand out? How do you offer some kind of differentiated experience? And that's where I think it goes back to you have to get all of the hygiene correct, but you still have to offer something that's distinctive.
But going back to what you were saying about engagement, I mean, I know that's a really big thing, isn't it? I mean, whether it's responding to a complaint on Twitter or going, I know some hotels on Tripfez will comment on every single person who comments about their hotel. Is that a value when do you find that people who are looking, as Tim said, when there's so many of the same services across the board here, is that engagement key to winning over that person?
Can I comment on that? So it's absolutely, it's essential, right? It's now, it's customer service, but now broadcasted to millions of people. So we actually train all of our hotels to try to answer almost every single review, and that keeps the general managers very busy. It's a problem, right? The old days, it's a customer is upset, they go to the front lobby and they complain. So the most they can impact is, the 30 or so people in the lobby. They can scream and shout, 50 people hear it. Now, 50 million people can see it because it's on TripAdvisor, right? And what we found also is that while positive reviews are great, and we want lots of those, and we will respond to the positive reviews, but there's only so much you can say, but other than thank you very much. It's actually really important to respond to the negative reviews, and that's a service recovery, and people can see that if we were able to recover that unhappy guest, then how we responded to that unhappy guest, that actually brings us more loyalty and more business than having a ton of positive reviews.
I'd just like to add that I think I kind of agree. So when I travel, let's say I look for reviews. So the thing is, I don't look for the good reviews. So if I want to stay, let's say at the Aloft KL, Kuala Lumpur, I'm going to go to TripAdvisor, for example, or any review site or any blogs. Then I'm going to click, let's see what the bad review is, what people are saying bad about the hotel. So that's what I would be focusing on reading. And I think a good respond always helps the brand, that I can see that, okay, so it's not, there's a different story to the whole thing. So it's not just the customer saying it's bad, but because there's other reason behind it. So I think it's really important for you to reply the reviews, to engage the customer, ask them what's happening. I stayed at a place, at a hotel once, and I had a terrible experience. So I started to blog about it and started to write negative review on TripAdvisor. So I'm getting from that, I think 20 private messages from people asking me, is it true that what you're saying? So I think people are really listening to reviews, to blogs, and they are actually following it. So it's not, you can spend a lot of money on TV advertising saying that this hotel is amazing, but if the reviews are bad, people are just going to believe the reviews more.
We'll have to leave it on that note. Respond to your good reviews and bad reviews, right? Thank you so much for joining us today.